Well, hi, everybody. This week I've been really fascinated again by the way that Jesus interacted and really battled with the religious leaders of his day. If there was an overarching conflict in the ministry of Jesus, it wasn't between Jesus and sinners. It was between Jesus and the religious elite. And this is something that we see over and over again in the Gospels. And I want to tell one quick story out of Mark chapter 2. You might know this story, actually. Jesus is teaching, and he's become very popular. The crowds have come after him to hear him teach and to see him heal. And the crowds are so packedly tight in this room where Jesus is teaching that there's no way to get a man who's been paralyzed into the room. And so his friends go up on the roof, and they remove stones and the structure of the ceiling, and they lower this man down into this darkened room where Jesus is teaching, and they lay the man before Jesus. By the way, probably not the smoothest lowering. We always think of it maybe in a stylized way where he just gently drifts down. It was probably a rocky ride to get before Jesus, and that makes me think maybe the path that gets you to Jesus may not be the smoothest, but salvation's at the end of it. Mark chapter 2, it says in verse 5 that Jesus looked at these men who had lowered their friend down to be healed. And it says, seeing their faith, Jesus said to the paralyzed man, my child, your sins are forgiven. And I heard Pastor Andy Stanley say recently that that's not why he was there. The paralyzed man probably heard those words, your sins are forgiven. And he's like, that's not why I'm here. He wanted healing. But some of the teachers of the religious law who were sitting there thought to themselves, what is he saying? This is blasphemy. Only God can forgive sins. Only God can forgive sins. Jesus knew immediately what they were thinking, so he asked them, why do you question this in your hearts? Is it easier to say to the paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven? Or stand up, pick up your mat, and walk? So basically, Jesus is almost taunting them by saying, oh, you say I can't forgive because that's reserved for God? Well, you know what else is reserved for God? The ability to heal miraculously, and I'm going to do both. And so he says to prove that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he turns to the paralyzed man in verse 11, stand up, pick up your mat, and go home. And the man jumped up, grabbed his mat, and walked out through the stunned onlookers. And they were all amazed and praised God, exclaiming, we've never seen anything like this before. Jesus was very, very clear that what was reserved in that day for the temple system and the sacrifices and all the ways that people had to tick through the list of requirements to get access to God and to gain God's approval in their life. And mind you, they had a very elaborate system for receiving forgiveness of sins and making yourself pleasing to God. Jesus is making it clear that the rules have changed now that he's on the scene. And things that were reserved and kept watch over by these religious leaders in the temple system, now it was being released into the wild, so it were, as Jesus was walking around and talking with people in their homes and doing what? Bringing heaven to earth. The thought that someone's home, a sinner's home, a tax collector or a prostitute's home, would be the scene where God would encounter another human was unheard of. This was reserved for the holiest place in the temple. And now Jesus was inviting and creating that kind of interaction in people's homes. My goodness, no wonder the religious leaders were upset. The thing that they controlled and that they were in charge of was now being turned out to the people. And this is, I think, is why they were so fiercely against the message that Jesus brought. And for us, if our religious sensibilities are never offended by the way that Jesus brings heaven to people, if we're never have that sense of, whoa, 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 Jesus, you're going too far, then maybe we're not actually encountering the real Jesus, because I believe that he still offends religious sensibilities today. And if you're like me and you've been in religious circles and in the church for long enough, with that has probably come some religiousness in your own heart. And I believe that maybe this week, what Jesus would do is remind us he's still the upsetter of religious norms. And he still comes in to show us just how audacious and far-reaching the love and compassion of God is for the outsiders, the outcasts, and those that society doesn't even want anything to do with. Those are the people that Jesus moves into their worlds, sits in their homes, places a hand on their heads and says, get up and walk. He has the power and the authority. And that is, I think, what he gives to us as we move around and operate in our everyday life. So we have a job today to allow that authority to come out in our conversations and the way that we look at people and love people, and even those that we would consider maybe on the outside of our crew or our circle, that we'd love them with the compassion and the audacious mercy of God.